Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sage Thyme. Lillian here with you today. Welcome and blessed Letha. Happy summer solstice to everybody in the northern hemisphere. And blessed Imbolc, happy winter solstice to everybody in the southern hemisphere. Today, I want to do a beautiful highlight on the energies of the solstice, how it is an activation point for what we can really tune into over the next 6 months if we choose, and what to look at in the preceding several days that has been surfacing for you in particular, so that you can get an idea of the themes that you have broken through and relinquished and released, as well as how those themes will be carried into the activation point of today's solstice and throughout the next 6 months. You can really, if you choose, tune into it, take time and space with it on a daily basis, and whether you follow astrology or not, you can completely move with the ebbs and flows, the ignition points, the release points, the challenge points, and the gifting points that come in with these astrological aspects, as well as in collaboration with your own personal design and cycles. And so having a point of reference, a perspective from a different person's point of view and their narrative can really support you developing your own, hearing your own narrative, hearing your own openings, so that you can place the right key in each lock and be present to it, be present to what's coming forth. Because, well, to some degree, of course, life can happen to us and we can be unawares of the lessons and the growth and development that is occurring around us and within us for us in our own life path. It is such a far more rich and expansive and potentiating experience to be aware and cognizant, even if you don't know the details of what is what and why, to have that presence of awareness and continue to develop opening that conscious presence of awareness provides such incredible empowerment for not only how you can choose to be, but the details of your story that you would otherwise be not privy to. And there is an incredible empowerment that comes with that, which, you know, I can explain in all these words and thoughts and ideas and so forth and metaphors. But these are the kind of things when you start reaching for and existing within the divine, multidimensional, multifaceted expression of existence, that we've all had those experiences where there are no words that can properly define, and to put words to them only diminish really the experience, and it tries to attach our cognition to something that is really meant to be moved through. Hello, fruit fly. in an observation, in the higher witness, the higher heart, the Holy Spirit, the higher self state. So here's what we'll be talking about today. In addition to, I will get started here in just a moment about the astrology and why it is pertinent. You don't need to know astrology, of course. And then I will be moving into how it is to be opening up to and experiencing and holding intention, focused intention of your choice when it comes to experiencing a multidimensional, multifaceted existence, especially when it comes to interactions with others and scenarios in our life, and how to really make that work for you. So some of the key concepts and ideas that I'll be covering throughout today's video, and it might be a long one because there are big concepts, but I want to keep it short and then leave space for people to ask questions. For those of you who view this video, if you have questions or thoughts or your own experiences, of course, please always lovingly and compassionately and in wonderment or whatever works for you, offer those questions and inquiries and thoughts in the comments. So key concepts and words that we'll be going over that Spirit has really brought in to my attention during meditation before this is deliberate themed choices. And we'll get into more detail of that. But this will be choices that you make in both spoken context and inward, consciously aware, mantra meditative state. Simple one-word choices. And allowing those to, well, we'll get into that more. I like to just go on and on, don't I? Another big theme will be clarity. And this will come through in many different ways for everybody. But the analogy that I like to give, that Spirit's been really posturing for me, is to imagine that you have a puzzle, a huge 10,000 piece puzzle, and they're tiny little pieces, and each one gives you a glimpse, as any puzzle does, into the greater picture of what it is. And you can look at it and have an idea of what you're looking at. You can even describe it and create a story or an understanding and an explanation of it. But when you have, say, 300 pieces of a 10,000 piece puzzle, and none of them are connected pieces, they're all dispersed throughout the puzzle, it's easy to not know. It's easy to think you know how things are going to connect, and then you get a new piece and you're like, I feel so disillusioned. That changes the story of everything. So the clarity that is coming in, that is breaking through actually right now in these last few days, and will continue to do so over the next 6 months, is going to be really empowering for everybody who is focusing on and living in a practice of ever developing awareness and presence within their heart and their body, that consciousness presence, dropping out of the head into the heart and then going from there. Another point that we'll be discussing is multifaceted experiences and interactions, as I said before, and the subsequent empathy that comes with experiencing and interacting with others from their point of view and all their layers of point of view and the influences that aren't even theirs point of view and so forth. So it's a big topic. We're going to highlight it today, and then we'll go into it more over the coming weeks and months, because I just know it's getting big. And we're also going to talk about ancient healings. Today's initiation of the solstice, when the sun moved into that first minute, the sun moved into Cancer. There was a incredible activation of ancient healings between the masculine and the feminine. And when I say that, I'm not exactly talking about what we consider the masculine and feminine today, even within the self. I'm speaking the lineages of our lineages and the lineages before that, essentially the origin seed points of masculine and feminine of our planet itself, and how we are presently healing within our modern day interactions and internal movements and reflections and healings and so forth, how we're healing those ancient wounds that still live within us and still have a rippling effect in everything that we do and experience. But here's what's really fascinating is we are, and are more so, continuing to be opening up to the timeline of lineage of this ancient masculine and feminine, and seeing how it started, where it all came from, why it came from there, and then all of the shifts and changes that those original masculine feminine energies, those wounds, those original wounds, how they morphed and developed and grew over time, and then how we can heal that within ourselves and around us. Also, I have a fly in here. We'll go over anchoring and holding those choices that I spoke to in the first bit. And then finally, observing, increasing our observation and our listening skills in the multidimensional experience of reality. So let's get into today's solstice energies. As far as astrology goes, the summer solstice occurred Pacific Standard Time at exactly 7:58 a.m. And you can adjust that time to yours. And that was the initiation of the sun moving into the zero, from Gemini into the 0 degree and 0 minute, 0 second point of Cancer. Now let's see what came out. Interesting. The water card came out, which includes Cancer as well as Pisces and Scorpio. And then I'll show you that water card briefly. There's a lot of beautiful imagery coming through there. And then the 12th house came through. Fantastic. 12th house. In this card, the illustrator wrote spirituality, transcendence, karma, sacrificial service, and healing. I would say yes to all that, of course, and there's so much more. How the 12th house in astrology, which generally houses Scorpio, is the death and transformation house. Interestingly enough, I'm going to pull this up on my computer so I can take an accurate look at it here. Let's go back to, interestingly enough, at the time of the, let me go back a little bit. At the time of the solstice initiation point at 7:58 a.m., I want to make sure this is accurate. The 12th house, yep, Cancer was fully in the 12th house. So the sun was moving into Cancer 0 degrees and 0 minutes. And Cancer was in the 12th house in terms of the Pacific coastal line, the Pacific Standard Time coastal line in that location. And so, particularly for those in this area, and you can look at astrology charts if you're so inclined to see where the ascendant is in your region at the time of the solstice activating itself. But here we have the water card, Cancer, right? Which normally houses Scorpio, another water sign. And the 12th house, talking about death and transformation. And here I've spoken about this reference before in other readings where this card came up. Forgive the terrible nail polish, my goodness. I meant to take that off. For those of you who have been watching my videos, you know I've been out in the woods, so I'm a little bit not put together socially. The rebel in the front speaks to, it's not really rebel, right? It's nice things, fish and bird cages and feathers and shells and things that we would possess. But it's in the foreground, and if you move through what looks like a passageway here in the center, you leave all of that behind. And it does become rebel because it breaks away. It is no longer needed. What's in the center is first crossing these waters with a reflection of the moon, and then reaching a point of destination that you can't quite see what that is. Is it a building? Is it an island? Is it a mountain and a dock? We don't know, but we want to get closer to find out. And that's part of house 12. So that's part of the clarity that I'm speaking of. So here, with today's summer solstice activation point, we've got a couple of really beautiful main players. We have Chiron in Aries at 19 degrees, Mercury in Gemini at 18 degrees, and then you've got Lilith and Mars on top of each other, Black Moon Lilith and Mars in Leo at 18 degrees. So all three at 18/19 degrees. And they're all making a trine. So they're all supporting each other. Chiron in Aries has been there for a while. It moves a lot slower. And Chiron, the wounded healer, right? We brought this up with the 12th house. Aries being the self-identification persona. So identifying the self as the wounded healer, looking deep into where am I wounded? How do I heal that? And who am I in light of that? And developing the self within and around that, and doing so with such an awareness of reflection, whether you write or meditate or speak in a like-minded and hearted group and community, or you art through cooking and painting and dance and gardening. But spending that time in deliberate reflection and aware reflection of who am I as the wounded healer that was wounded in these different ways and is healing and transcended that in the different ways. And this is a passageway that, at least for our time on this planet, I don't recognize as ever ending. It's a continual unfoldment, particularly in the time and the era of human history that we are in and what we're all about right now. So then you've got Mercury in Gemini. Mercury is housed in Gemini as well as Virgo. And this is its powerful place to sit. It is in Gemini specifically, has a great deal to do with that vertical, I just lost the word, channeling, vertical channeling, receiving and integrating information from the vertical environment, meaning the heavens and the earth, versus the horizontal environment, meaning the collective. That is Mercury. And then, and remember, it's in connection now with Chiron, working to integrate what's at this core receiver, your body, cellular memory, energetic imprints and signatures, conditionings, programs, influences, so forth. And now it's also in a trine, in a kind of hand holding connection. I was thinking of those, not Legos, but they're like Legos where they connect the things together. So here we've got at the peak of the triangle is Mercury in Gemini, and then you've got here Chiron and Aries, and then here you've got Lilith and Mars right on top of each other. And I will tell you from my own experience and what I've been observing with others, Mars moving into that exact conjunction today, these past few days of it getting closer and closer, which is pretty much always the case when there's an astrological transit. The days before are the tension points and the resolving and the unraveling and and then today it opens up. It has been a doozy. Mars, the god of war, traditionally thought of as Black Moon Lilith, the original wife of biblical Adam, the one that was rejected and thrown out by the Christian and Catholic, maybe just the Christian, God, out of the Garden of Eden because she would not submit and be subordinate to Adam. She had her own thoughts, her own feelings of what it means to be in right relationship, in reciprocal relationship. And she would not be dominated by the masculine, this feminine. And so God cast her out for not being subservient, and then created Eve out of Adam, where Lilith was created like Adam, out of dust, of her own accord. And so off she went, and there's a whole dark and uglier tale of Black Moon Lilith. But I will tell you, I have spent a lot of time before I even knew anything about her as an archetype and an energy and a signature. I have spent a lot of time with her coming to me and sharing her whole story. And it is so much more. And so here you've got Mars, which really does to me represent Adam in this particular union at a more rooted, ancient healing lineage. Of course, the story of the Garden of Eden and Adam, Eve, and Lilith isn't the beginning story of Earth by any means, but we'll go there and talk about that right now, where there has been this disservice to the incarnate masculine and feminine from this very beginning story. One that didn't come from this story. It began even before, when the earlier incarnations of the earth, the archetypes and the energetic goddess and god that came into the earth as influences had their own wounds that they started. The Garden of Eden is but it is a subsequent, later developed lineage of it. And so I tell you, I felt, without even knowing, I looked up the astrology at one point about 5 days ago because I thought, what is this? I'm feeling some Lilith and I'm feeling some, and there it was. Mars was creeping right in to become in conjunction with her in Leo. And it was intense. And I feel that conjunction that's happening today on the solstice is really going to bring in an unfolding in our day-to-day practical lives, in our relatedness with our own masculine or feminine within us in relation to another person and their masculine and feminine, and having kind of a back and forth, whether, let's say, you are a woman and you're in a relatedness with a man, and you might feel your masculine and his feminine at a tensile point and overlapping and trying to work around some old wounds and knots and tensions. And then it'll traverse and you'll feel your feminine and his masculine. And it'll be like, well, but this happened. And before that started it. And there'll be this layered stacking conversation and reveal to you that will show everybody's part in all of it. Everybody's states of victimhood and perpetrator in all of it, in your current present day life as well as the lineage historically. And so this is, and then we've got Mercury, that vertical channel, bringing in support, guidance, insight, and clarity from the cosmos, from star beings, or the heavens, we'll just say. And Chiron holding hands right there in there, saying, you are the wounded healer. Amongst all the many things that you are also that. And so remember, this is part of your journey. This is part of your unfolding and opening. So we've got also today at that initiation point of the solstice, of the sun moving into Cancer, a kite. And of course, the kite is made of the trine that I just spoke of. And then the other part of the kite, the bottom part in Sagittarius, is the vertex. Vertex is a very quick moving point around the astrological charts. And it is referenced as a destiny point. And so because of its quick movement and because it's right at that perfect, 19 degrees, the perfect exact opposition with Mercury and then the other two friends in the trine. It's in Sagittarius. Sagittarius, the sigil being the arrow. So it's making this kite formation, and it has the appearance and the effect and feeling of holding a bow and arrow, and that pulling back of the string having the arrow knocked and ready to release. The arrow's feathers, the pullback being in the vertex point, that quick moving, this is something that is in your destiny. And this steady, gentle hold and release right into Mercury in Gemini, that clarity, clarification. And so you, if you can reflect back to this morning, to the minutes leading up to, during, and after of 7:58 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, the exact perfection initiation of the solstice, you may have experienced a glimpse or a tranced state or an inclination into meditation or emotions and thought forms that came through that were a bit new, or maybe things you've glimpsed at before but were really coming through in more clarity, more spectrum, and more vivid knowing. And that is that destiny glimpse, release of the arrow into what you personally will be working through over the next 6 months until we reach the December 21st Imbolc winter solstice, as is in the northern hemisphere. So those are really incredible things to think about, reflect on, journal about, and see what comes up for you. So again, we're talking about ancient healings, and we're also talking about, at the core of everything, a full lineage from start to present and beyond, feminine and masculine, within and then without, reconciliation. And reconciliations, true reconciliations, sustainable, lasting reconciliations that lend and become transcendent ways of being, those come through empathy. And those come from having a primary experience into another person's perspective. And so we're having that more and more as an experience, not as a theory, not as a, oh, I get that, I feel that. It's an experience. You can see, feel, hear, touch with all the sensual sensations, what that other person's reality really was. And when that occurs, that's when there is a complete opening of the tablecloth, and all the things that are gathered inside are completely opened and revealed. Things can be sorted and looked through, and there's an understanding that while forgiveness is a wonderful tool, and please always feel free to experience that, there is a knowing and I use the word experience so much, I'm trying not to use it over and over again, but there is an experience that transcends forgiveness, and that is simply a recognition at a most deep particle level of understanding and empathy, when I can experience what it was to be my greatest foe, my greatest adversary, what it was to be that individual, and everything that contributed to them being that and inflicting maybe the most cruel and harmful of things, or not, anything in between, but to experience what it is to be them. There is no need for forgiveness, because there is simply love and understanding. That is, to me, what compassion, the Guan Yin archetype, really represents, of unfiltered, raw compassion. And that really only comes from primary experience of what the other one is going through. And if you come into this world wanting to develop your compassion and leaning into what would be the archetype of Guan Yin, without any doubt and with total requirement, that individual will be necessitated to experience the opposite of compassion in the deepest, most intense polarities and extremes possible, because it's only through those extremes and lacks and knots, those polarities, can we truly know a greater depth and expansion and power of compassion? And that is the case with anything, right? How can we know life without knowing death? You get it. So I think that covers all of that. Yeah, I did, and I like the note I made here. When interacting with another individual of opposition, or another institution, or another just way of this duality that we live in, the challenges that we go through, when able to experience the other side of it, and all of its layers too, and that develops more and more as you move through it, a person can come to realize that, especially putting it in the model of a relationship with somebody, that the other person that really, truly, and in earnest was doing all the cruel things and the horrible things and everything like that, and maybe you were the victim without a choice, in a conscious sense and in a moment-to-moment sense. When the scripts get flipped and you experience the totality of all the conditions of the adversary, of the nemesis, you realize that there really was, and what it was for them to be interacting with you, and what that triggered and activated in them, and the history and the lineage of that. You begin to realize that there are no innocent parties. And that is a really hard thing to say, because I can hear and feel, and I've experienced how wrong that feels, that statement. Because there are obvious atrocities in the world where innocents were harmed. But when you're able to look at it through all lines of scope and perspective, all timelines, or not timelines, all layers of consciousness, and all lineages of what brought these two or many together at this opposing situation, then you can see the truth of it on a bigger level. And that's where the two-way interface becomes no more. And now you can start moving into all interactions with everything, big and small, obvious and succinct, or vague and, just vast. And you can walk into all those and step back and be in a space of observation, witness, and remembrance, even when, in an obvious sense, the experience, the interaction is bringing at you maybe hostility or pain or all these different things. So it's a complex and ever unfolding experience. And at the same time, this is where the clarity is coming in. For wherever you have been in that, whether it has still been at the rote binary or the polarity of one and then the other, or whether you've already been interfacing in a dimensional way. I know a lot of people have been, and everybody's at different stages and layers and everything. There's always an influence of uncertainty and lack of clarity still, and that clarity is coming in now, and it is bringing a better grasp to be able to, as the individual, create a touchstone where you put your foot and you go, this is who I am. And then you can interface and interplay with all these different aspects of the reality without losing yourself or getting confused or being reactive, being able to stay in the heart space, in the intention that you choose. And that's when not only inner alchemy starts to occur, but that's when you can really start affecting and influencing the alchemy of the others in front of you. And then they start having these incredible opportunities to open up and heal, because you're interacting with different consciousness levels of them, their higher self, their It goes on and on. I won't even get into that today. We'll get there. So the other thing in terms of astrology that I would like you all to look at and keep your eyes out for is Venus. She has been moving into that conjunction with Mars and Lilith that just happened over the last few weeks. And I feel like, and looking at what's going to happen in the next week from now, at the end of June, when Venus reaches the conjunction alignment, the transit with Black Moon Lilith, and Mars will already have, oh, I changed the screen. He'll already be on his way into Virgo almost. Yeah, not quite, but he'll have moved on. Venus is bringing with her heart. And so she's bringing that heart of healing, and she's still in alignment and in trine with Chiron, the wounded healer in Aries. So she wants to bring in incredible healing of the heart, of the feminine, that will be supercharging and having in a way, a role of responsibility to then share with the masculine within the self and in the world around us. So healing that wounded feminine in a very, very deep and ancient way again. And again, depending on how intense your practice is and your state of present awareness will reveal how deep you will be healing that wounded feminine. And this is not theoretical. This is in a very practical, objective, observational sense. This is creating a rippling effect. Just like if you were to go in nanoscopically into one cell in your body, and that one cell had, like many other cells in your body, had the genetic transcription of a disease. If you went into that one cell and healed, recoded that genetic transcription to not only heal, but heal in a way that for that one cell would create a powerful mutation that would then ripple like wavelengths, like a pebble in the water, ripple and shift through frequency, because cells resonate, that's how they speak, so specifically that it would start to shift the genetic transmutation of all the cells around it, and then exponentially that moves out into the entire organ and the entire body. Now you have a whole new orchestrated resonance from that one cell that's now in collaboration with all the billions and trillions of cells, billions I think in the body, creating one giant, the body, orchestrated and in synchronicity resonance. And that resonance is the communication for everything that it touches, all the people and the plants and the animals and just the wavelengths of energy. And it's communicating now this new transmutated healing and transcendent way of being. And you are now that song. All you simply need to do is stay in the healed space, perpetuate the healing, release the wounded. And so the more aware you are of this, the more powerful you are in maintaining, containing, and perpetuating this. And this is a lot of what's behind when people say, you know, your frequency matters and all these different things. And some people know what the reference of what they're speaking about, some don't. And that's okay too, as long as it's going. And I truly believe that knowledge is power. Wisdom is infinite power in a sense. It sounds a little too like grandiose, but I mean, in the sense of awareness allows for a person, an individual, to maintain something, without having it taken away from them. And if it is taken away through adversity or whatever, they know how to get it back because they had the presence of awareness on what was happening all the steps of the way instead of having it just given to them and occurring. You see what I mean? Okay, so watch Venus over the next week. She makes her conjunction with Black Moon Lilith on the 28th. And these will be new codes of becoming the new, greater, more enriched, transcendent version of compassion and, I can't come up with a better word for this. I try to not do the negative word, but compassion and disallowance for an imbalanced feminine masculine dynamic. Boundaries is a word that's used a lot. Intolerance, these are not great words. It's more of an affirmative, this is how it's going to be and better. We aren't going back. And so when that toxic feminine or toxic masculine comes in to try to shake this new, invigorated, vital, vibrant, radiant, transcendent level of your new compassion and hold of determined self, and that comes in, your no, Lilith is beautiful for that. Your compassioned no is more potent and powerful than ever. And you can say no and hold space in the heart and be fierce, even edged. As long as you're holding that space, knowing that that can bounce back at that other individual and it can cause a wound, but you're not doing it to wound them. Excuse me, by the way. You're not doing it to wound them. You're doing it because you know that they're calling that in because you're having a conversation with aspects of them that says, it is time for my incarnate self to learn this and to stop perpetuating this. And you're having this in-depth ongoing conversation again, excuse me. And so that no isn't a vindictive or a defensive or retaliatory or anything, but it can be fierce and it can be harsh, but it's from a place that experientially you feel so much love and compassion. In fact, so much that you feel and know the wound that they are going through as they're going through it. You can empath that and still hold your sovereignty and go, oh, I know that no really cut your cheek, metaphorically speaking, really got you in the gut and sent you in a spiral. I love you. I am witness to your journey. I am not here to fix it. I love you. You are going to get through this. And that presence, that hold, that is what we're talking about here with Mars moving over Black Moon Lilith and then Venus coming in and just heart and Chiron just waving his flag. And I'm telling you, there are things that are happening. Okay. Is there anything else here that I want to discuss? Yeah, it's more just gibberish and words. All good gibberish and words, but don't need to go over it again in another way. The key here is to choose presence awareness within the self, within the body, dropping the consciousness into the body and exploring what that means to you if you haven't already been doing it for a long term. And if you have been, then you know that it keeps unfolding into new experiences, new powerful, I don't even know, words, new things, right? Okay. So now, take a deep breath with me, everybody. Let's feel that breath. When you breathe in, feel it dropping all the way down and landing at the bottom of your pelvic bone. Filling up that space, making your heart, your solar plexus diaphragm expand, and then breathing it out and letting it swirl around and move around. Okay. So this next part, I am going to probably briefly go over. These are big concepts, and I want to highlight them because if you've already been receiving downloads, meditating on these things, it'll validate that. And then for future videos, these concepts and ideas will be interplaying, most definitely, as I said, for the next 6 months and beyond. So, as I mentioned before, clarity. So I want you to think about what it is to hold clarity in the midst of, as I spoke about before, a multifaceted and even a tumultuous, maybe not always, engagement. So here you are in your space and you're interacting with another person. And we'll use a tumultuous dynamic because that's when we're challenged the most. There are things that they are doing, being, saying that is shaking awake wounds within us, right? Because we're calling this in. So to be in a multidimensional and multifaceted awareness is to be in multiple conversation of yourself. We can use Jungian terms, superconscious, subconscious consciousness, and all the in-betweens that were and were not discovered by Carl Jung with theirs. Or you could look at it as the awareness, the incarnate self, the underworld self, and the higher self. And those are just 3 of many. I have experienced myself recently those 3 having not only their distinct conversations and perspectives and agendas, separate and unified, because ultimately they're always unified, as well as kind of the faded phases between. And then now we're talking a vertical kind of awareness. And then if you go horizontal of the self, not of the collective, but horizontal of the self, then you start to experience different aspects of yourself from different viewpoints, not just the part of you that's in your body. And there was a movie, a black and white movie made long ago, I think it's called The Rose, and it was a scene of, I don't remember the whole thing, I don't even know if I actually saw it, maybe someone told me about it, and I have this visceral memory. There's a scene of a rose falling, and these things happening, right? Someone falling down the stairs or something like that. And you see it from one camera lens, but the whole movie is a different camera lens from different people, different things, different angles. In each 3-minute segment of this moment tells an entirely different story. And this is what I'm talking about, folks. So now that's just you. Now flip the script and go into the purview of your engagement, your person that you're engaging with in just a one-on-one. We're not even in a crowd or a family yet. So now you're in them. And now you're experiencing, while you're in yourself, you're experiencing what it is to be them consciously and in the present moment, what it is to be them in their wounded lower aspects of self, and what it is that the higher self of them is trying to help them break through. This is so complex, so dynamic, and so exciting of an experience. I cannot tell you. And it's incredibly confusing and bumpy, and there's a lot of fallibility and request for grace of yourself and the other, because it's easy to lose track of the touchstone being that intention. And here is where it comes in when I spoke about at the beginning of your choice, choosing your touchstone. This is a daily and ongoing meditative prayer. It is a living as ceremony through each in-breath and out-breath throughout your entire day. And it starts with a practice, and then it becomes the all-day practice and all night. I wake up in the night hearing myself. If I'm in a bad dream, there's another part of me that is speaking to the dream self that's maybe going through this nightmare of the touchstone choice words. And they go something like this. So, the first word I ever chose in the thick of my turmoil and trauma processing, which was insane and prolonged and excruciating, and I definitely want to share that with everybody because it is to this day often impossible for me to believe, but I know there are some that have gone through different levels of this. When I was in this intense pain and in trauma and torture, the only word I could touch on, because it was so intense and ripping apart and losing of the self, there was no real reality to grasp on other than what was around me, and that just seemed asinine. So I chose the one word love, because to me, I had already previously developed a practice and a knowing and understanding that God is synonymous with what I would call love and what that means to me. And so I chose love. And the phrase that I would say over and over again is, I am love. I am love. And it was, at that time, simply a light at the end of a very long and dark tunnel that I couldn't quite touch. I couldn't even really see, but I knew it was there. I had to believe it because I could not continue without it, and I had to continue. So I chose love. So the way that this goes now is, after a time I started creating a prayer format, I guess you could say, where I said these 2 sentences and then I allowed myself to experience what that was in my inner universe. The first sentence being, I choose blank. The second sentence being, I am blank. So to use the word love, I choose love. I am love. And then feel it. And do you feel it when you say it? And when you say it quietly within, it's going to have a completely different and just as important impact as when you say it out loud. So both are really important. The silent prayer and the vocal prayer. And then you get to start playing with words and feeling what they mean to you. So the second one I came to was, I choose calm. And I think of like a pond or a lake in the morning sunrise when everything is perfectly still and the water is like glass, and the sunrise that hasn't quite come up but is bringing in all this light and the dark and inner plane, and there is just this pristine calming of the waters of emotion and consciousness, calm waters. So I choose calm. And I feel that, what that means to my body when I say those words quietly or out loud. I am calm, my 2 sentences. So then I started choosing other words like grace, clarity was a big one, strength, vitality. And so choosing those words, and you don't have to go with one. I don't actually. In my prayers, in my delegated time slot prayers as well as the all day, but when I sit and take time, like this is my prayer time, to make sure I'm staying in prayer and in ceremony throughout the day, even when I'm busy and not quite as present as I could be or would want to be. I allow also what I feel are my spirit team, my higher self will give me words that I need to focus on, and I'll feel those words entering and moving throughout my body and my being, and affecting the transmutation of my genetic transcription. I'll feel that occurring. It has an effect and it lasts. The more I do it, the more lasting it becomes, and the more true that touchstone is. So when then I'm in a situation where somebody road rages around me, or I see a parent in the grocery store like lose their marbles on their kid in a most violent, harmful way, you know, whether it's obvious or just energetic and verbal, you know, all the different things, or I'm in a reaction, or not a reaction, a relation conversation with somebody that I'm feeling particularly challenged by, but I want to stay in love. These touchstone phrases quickly and immediately not only bring me back to it, but then reawaken the power of where I have developed myself within those touchstones. So that's a really, really essential part for me. And maybe you have your own way of doing that that's totally different. I would love to hear about that. Share with us, what do you do that continues to perpetuate effectiveness for you in coming out of your mind and into your heart space, the holy heart, not the emotional space, the heart space that is that portal to your divine self and the great divine that there is, source, the all. And then that actually, I already touched on this, the second point of holding clarity in the midst of a multidimensional engagement is still point of the mind. So almost like flushing a toilet, you know, the thinking mind is so busy and so intense. And when we create a still point, it's like flushing it down and through, bringing the consciousness down to the heart space, staying in your breath, the breathing in, the breathing out, allowing those choice words that you have, the I ams, to create the environment, and then allowing that consciousness that's now being held in the heart space to open up and move throughout the body a bit more, staying out of the mind, staying out of the thinking. The mind has its purpose, but we used it and overused it, this masculine aspect, so overtly that now being in a practice of recognizing its value, but staying in the heart, the mind will then come into play when it's appropriate and when it's needed. So going into that heart space, dropping the consciousness in it, following the you can feel the sensation of the consciousness the more in tune you get, moving throughout your body, filling your physical self. And as that happens, more of your spiritual self becomes more concentrated within the physicality, and more with practice and deliberation will move you and navigate you. And the heart will be able to see. Instead of seeing with the eyes, you will actually see from the heart space. You will hear from the heart space. You will sensorially experience the world beyond even the five senses, including them, through the heart space. To be in conscious presence in your heart space and experience touch is a very different thing than experiencing it from the brain's neurology. So play with that. Really enjoy it. And then allow the witness self, the higher self, the Holy Spirit, however you would like to term it. I like to change it around a lot. To take the wheel. You know, the one of the phrases we all hear from Christianity and Catholicism is, you know, God take the wheel, Spirit take the wheel. And then trust in that divine collaboration, because you're anchoring in your touchstone as who you are. And if you choose love, if you choose compassion, forgiveness, grace, all these really specific types of words, if that's what you're choosing, what comes in as your divine higher self works with that. because that's part of who you are. And that's your touchstone, and that's your code of what you will allow and what you won't. You know, if you're, which I doubt it would ever be, but if your touchstone has to do with, I am retaliation and violence, spirit, that's not my choice, I'm using that as an example, then there's going to be discord. You'll get that. I don't need to explain that. You know it. And then finally, the last point is to surrender. And the practice of surrendering is not only a theoretical and philosophical and heart experiential idea and concept, it is visceral, it is transdimensional, it is what will, thus the act of surrendering, the experience of surrendering, and the unfoldment of that. As you go further, it goes further. As you surrender more, surrender has more to show you. Just as trust does. This is the nature of spirit. This is the mathematics of a fractal, the spiral. This is what we all are and what is within all of us. So surrender to the unfolding, knowing and trusting in yourself that you are love, that you are kindness, that you are acceptance, that you are forgiveness, knowing that because you're choosing it. And this is where your choice comes in. And when that slips away, you choose it again. And then you understand that we're fallible and this is a process. And that's okay to make mistakes because that's the process. You come back to your choice. Even when you get reactive and angry and volatile, or in your head, or are feeling vindictive or whatever, you're becoming aware of it. So that's perfect. And then you're choosing again, which is part of the essential ingredient for healing it. So, splendid. Allow yourself to make mistakes. Surrender to those mistakes because it is in design with, say, the interaction between two people. And say you do get reactive and you let that carry you away. And there's a part of you that knows that it's supposed to be reactive because that's how this other person is going to awaken to it. And perhaps, though, instead of staying in the witness heart space, the observer space, you get in there, you let your mind get in there, and your thinking and your old stories get in there. And so you kind of start to just with your mind. That's all right. You get to forgive yourself for that because that's part of the pulling up from under the earth, making it visible. Okay, I choose not that. I choose compassion. I choose calm. I choose peace. And so now that same scenario can happen, but your head is in your heart. And so the state of who you are here is, I am providing you with the activity that your higher self is very clearly, almost audibly saying, this is what is needed. And you'll feel it. You'll know it. There will be no doubt. In fact, there won't even be an option. But instead of it being a reaction, it'll be this heartful outpouring that has a vocalization that very clearly can be interpreted two, at least, but two opposing very different ways. And so you will feel and say something from such an utter space of love and compassion and endearing embrace to the other, recognizing that they're going to interpret it in a way that's very different. And you can look at them and say, I know, I understand, I love you. And they may think you're being condescending, but you know, and they'll get there. And that's the art, the beauty of this experience that has been very powerfully ignited. And we've been led up to this moment in many different ways, and many of us have been experiencing it in many different ways. But the puzzle pieces are becoming clear. We're getting a few more, and now we're sharing it. And the more we share, the more that ripple, resonant vibration influences. So a very long video that's very important. I do hope this video reaches you and validates, confirms, ignites, activates, supports, challenges you in all the right ways. My love to you, to all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence. And thank you for the work that you do. You are incredibly important to me and everybody else. Blessings. Happy solstice.